idea of waiting, right? And this is our last week. We're kind of going to hit on this. We're going to tie it all together. But I think one thing's true. Nobody enjoys waiting, right? Like, does anybody like waiting for stuff? No? Like, we want things now. We live in a culture where we see things now, and it's like, hey, we can order something on Amazon. Pretty much whatever you want in the world's going to be here in 2 days. You can get Christmas presents. You can open those early. You can get that now. And so while we're waiting for things in life, there tends to be some conflict of like, hey, I'm not really down for that. I don't really care about waiting for that. And then sometimes we even talk through this idea that while we're waiting on things, specifically when it's something bigger in life, God is faithful in that moment. We said one week, we said, hey, while you're waiting on stuff, when you bring that to God, He listens to you. So we talked about the power of prayer last week. We said this, it said, hey, even while you're young, while you're waiting for God to kind of make your future more apparent, so that you kind of know, hey, what's the future going to look like? What's high school going to look like? What's 8th grade going to look like? What's my family going to look like through this weird season? God's working during those moments. And then two, one of my favorite things is, throughout the course of this series, we've been able to look at Old Testament figures. We were able to look at people like Paul, who is not an Old Testament figure, but then on top of that, we were able to look at a couple guys from the Old Testament like David, and we were like, hey, look, David was a young guy just like us, yet God continued to work in his life. Today we're going to look at somebody different. We're going to look at somebody named Joseph. Now everybody say Joseph. Joseph is an important guy in the Old Testament, and today what I'm going to do is we're going to briefly kind of lay out his story, because there's a whole lot of details to it. So, maybe some of you guys have been in a place where you've heard about this before. Maybe you've been in a place where you've even seen the play like Joseph in the Technicolor Dreamcoat. That's a thing, right? Is that how it's pronounced? Joseph and the Amazing. I was pretty close though. You know, we're doing good. We're doing good. Last week I said improv, and this week I got the play name down. So we're doing good in the culinary arts section. So if you know the story of Joseph, here's a couple things that you might know. Right away, Joseph was a young dude. He was actually like the youngest, or like one of the youngest guys in his family. And then on top of that, he was in a place where back in that culture, they were constantly looking up to older siblings. Specifically, like the oldest people in the family were the ones that when people passed away, they would receive the inheritance. They were the ones that overall got like the leadership responsibilities over the family. And Joseph was a young dude who, even with this being the circumstance, was his dad's favorite. So, do any of you guys feel like your parents have a favorite sibling that's not you? Yeah, you do? Yeah. And then how does that make you feel? How does that make you feel that way? I would tell you it's probably not true, but how does that make you feel?
She's my favorite too, so.
So you understand. You're like, yeah, I get it.
I don't have one, but I'm sure they'll find one.
Yeah? So maybe you just feel that way. Anyways, if you've been in a place where you see like a younger sibling or an older sibling get spoiled, you're probably like, that son of a gun, right? Like, man, I cannot stand that person. And Joseph's brothers were in this place, right? They saw their dad, they saw how much he cared about Joseph, and they were jealous. They were ticked. So much so, they tried to do something that hopefully you guys have never gotten to that place. They're like, hey, I'm mad at my siblings, so what am I going to do? We're going to kill them. Not good. Not healthy, right? We're talking about healthy families in the worship center. That is not healthy. But then on top of that, they're like, you know what? We're not going to kill them anymore. That's too poor. Instead, we're just going to sell them into slavery. That's jacked up too. Not much better, okay? So anyways, Joseph was a dude who had all these family problems. His brothers locked him up into slavery, and before that dug a big hole and stuck him there. And he was just waiting on God. And then all of a sudden, his family, who he grew up with, actually tried to kill him, and then threw him into slavery. And then on top of that, it was waiting after waiting after waiting. While he was a slave, he was working hard, he was being obedient, but then he got framed for doing things that he didn't do. People lied about him and said he committed all these bad acts, and then on top of that, it wasn't even true. He was working hard, and then so he went from a good spot in slavery to worse and worse and worse. And then on top of that, when he was in prison, he actually met a friend who promised, hey, you were good to me, I'm going to get you out of here. And his friend for 2 years totally just stuck it to him and didn't even come back on his promise. So all of a sudden, he was in prison just waiting and waiting and waiting. Maybe you've been in a spot in life where you kind of feel like Joseph. You're just waiting and waiting and waiting. And you're waiting for God to move in this one area, and then all of a sudden it's like, hey God, I asked you to move over here, but all of a sudden there's this other big problem, and now you're waiting on this other big problem, and then another thing comes. That was this constant revolving pattern that he found himself in. But through that, God was still faithful. You see, that's the first part of that story there, but the story gets better. Eventually, God showed up and he showed Joseph, he's like, hey, look, man, I know you were concerned, I know you were scared, but through all that, I'm with you. And so what happened was, Joseph got an opportunity to actually shine. He got an opportunity to show up and do some cool things, to where God actually used him later on to become the Pharaoh's right-hand man. He was the guy who came from slavery, came from being like the young guy in the family, came from no point of responsibility in life to becoming Pharaoh's right-hand dude. And on top of that, he saved like the entire country of Egypt from a famine. If you don't know what a famine is, it's kind of like they don't have food, they don't have water, they don't have crops. That's sort of idea. He saved them from passing away, including his own family. Why? Because he was faithful. He was waiting on God over and over and over again. Yet through all that, God was working. Maybe you're in a place where you just feel like you're in this pattern where you're waiting on God. Maybe you keep waiting on the next thing to happen. Maybe you keep waiting on an opportunity to get a chance to lead, but you just feel like you're too young. Maybe you're waiting on an opportunity to get a shot to actually like grow into the person that you want to be, but you're like, hey man, for some reason I'm not there yet. If that's you, man, I just want to say, we've all been there before. And on top of that, God knows what you're going through. And he can work through this season. There's a couple of things where if you're at a place where you just feel like you're waiting, and you want God to do something in your life, there's 5 points here that you're going to fill in that are things you can start to do today to make that happen. So the first one is this. When you're in a place where you're waiting, the first thing that you got to do is this. You got to talk to God and don't stop. If you guys got your piece of paper in there, go ahead and fill in the rest of it. Fill in and don't stop. How do you talk to God? We talked about this last week, man. It's through prayer. We talked about how God, the creator of the universe, the creator of me and you, he cares about you and loves you so much that every single time we take some time and pray to him, he listens. Man, if you want to make the most of this period of waiting, start with talking with God. Man, treat him like a friend, like your best friend. Talk to him on the daily. There's a piece of scripture that says this. It says, rejoice always. Pray continually. Give thanks in all circumstances. Wait, God, you want us to give thanks in all circumstances? Even when life stinks? Yes, give thanks. Even when my grandparents come? Yes, give thanks. Even when school's coming to an end and I hate it and can't stand, yeah, you're supposed to be thankful. Give thanks to God in all circumstances. For this is God's will for you in Christ Jesus. Man, talk to God and don't stop. Oftentimes in life, when you feel like going to church the least, is when you need it the most. When you're just kind of angry, when you're frustrated, and you feel like praying the least, that's probably when you need to talk to God the most. Such a big point there. The second point is this. Remember, God is stronger than you think. Fill that in. God is stronger than you think. Man, I'm sure there were times in Joseph's life when he's like, hey, my family tried to kill me, and then they threw me into slavery. I'm sure he kind of started to doubt God a little bit. I'm sure he was in a place where he was scared, where he was afraid, and he kind of started to shrink all that he believed God was. But in that moment, what he didn't know then was that God was still working through that. That he would take Joseph's story and turn that into something really special. Turn that into God's story. Turn that into a miracle. Man, God wants to take your story and turn that into something special. Remember, God is stronger than you think he is. Never forget that. Man, we serve a powerful God. The next thing I want to fill in is this. And I want to start with this before we get to this. Man, I know what it's like to be in middle school, because regardless of how old you think your youth leaders are, we weren't there too long ago. You know what I'm saying, right? And I'm young too, so it was even closer. So for me, man, we're talking, I don't know, 7 years, something like that. Man, I'll be honest with you. Why do I love hanging out with you guys so much? There's a lot of reasons. But one of the biggest is this. I remember middle school, and to be honest with you, I'm like 22 at this point. Dude, those 3 years between 6th through 8th grade were some of the toughest years in my life. Why? Partly because sometimes people in middle school can be jerks, if we're being real, right? Maybe you realize that firsthand. And first off, I want to say this when we're talking about it. If you've been in a place where you've been kind of a jerk, man, know that it's a tough time. Dude, as Christians, we can be better than that. Now, with that being said, it's okay, man. God still loves you. We still love you. But let's not be mistreating people, especially us. We're supposed to be different. We're called by God to be different. But this idea of middle school being tough, man, when I was in 6th grade, when I was in 7th grade, there was like so much built-up insecurities, from bullying, from people looking at me different, to people judging me, to where I carried that around for a long time. And I actually started to feel that way. The same lies that people actually poured into me, I started to believe. So this next point might be a little shocker to you, but I'm telling you, it's true. We talked about God is stronger than you think he is, but you better believe this. Remember that you're stronger than you think you are. Fill that in. You're stronger than you think you are. I want to speak into that a little bit as you guys finish up writing. It's easy in life to doubt yourself and to doubt God. But remember this, man. We serve a powerful God. We serve a God who loves you, and we serve a God who created you. And not only did he create you, he created you, and he said, it is good. He said, hey, you are good. He said, I love you. He said, I created you in God's own image. The Bible talks about, this is why it's so important to read this. This isn't a book, man. This is God's love letter to you. It says in there that you are fearfully and wonderfully made. Never forget that. God made you with him in mind. He made you to be in like the likeness of God when you step into a relationship with him. Never forget that, man. You are stronger than you think you are. You might be faced with some circumstances now that concern you, that scare you, that make you feel uneasy, but God has got your back, and you can step above those. Why? Because we serve a good God who's going to carry you through that. Never forget how much you matter. Never forget that you're stronger than you think. And the last one is this. If we want to make the most of waiting, specifically when life is tough, remember this. Choose hope. Choose hope. Man, this is one place where there's a lot, but it's like, what's one major reason why following Jesus matters? Like, if other people are like, hey man, what if you're at a place where the whole God thing, you got it wrong? What if you're at a place where it's like, hey, you turned out to be, here's what I'd say. Man, even in that case, like, following Jesus gave me hope over and over and over again. Man, as Christians, dude, we believe in God. We believe that there's a God. We believe that he loves us. And then on top of that, we believe that, hey, the same God that loves us wants us to have an awesome future. We have hope in that. Through Jesus, we have hope. We have hope that, yeah, waiting sometimes stinks, but God is working through that. So choose hope. Man, 4 powerful things here. Talk to other people. When you're in a place where you're waiting on God, talk to other people, have good friendships. The next is, remember that God is stronger than you think. The next is, remember your worth. Remember that you're stronger than you think. And after that, it's choose hope. I want you to think right now, which one of these is the one that you need to work on the most? Which one of these is the one that hits home the most for you? We're going to talk a little bit in the small groups about this, but this is a powerful thing. Man, I want to challenge you. Whichever one of those is the most meaningful to you, take a good look at that this week and talk to God about it and be like, hey God, man, I pray that you'll help me feel a little bit more hopeful about the future. God, I pray that you'll help me understand my worth a little better. God, I pray that you'll help me understand just how powerful you are. Man, say a prayer like that, and I'm telling you, if you do, God will do that. He'll speak that into you. He'll make that happen. With that being said, man, I'm pumped to talk about this in our small groups. Let's go ahead and pray together, and then we'll break into groups. God, I want to thank you for the fact that you are a good God, that you're a faithful God, a God that loves us, a God that cares about us, a God that has our best interest for our lives in heart, God, and mind.